Hello and welcome to a completely spoiler-filled vlog for Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This is his fourth book in the Stormlight archive. He takes several years at a time to write these, and I have it early thanks to Hachette the publisher in Australia, so I am beyond excited right now. If you want spoiler-free content, I'll link my Sanderson playlist in the description, as well as the spoiler-free videos that I've done for the rest of this series. So this is your warning now. Click away because you don't want yourself spoiled for this incredible series. I haven't even started reading yet and already look. I think this is Kaladin. Oh, my baby. Oh, Elokar's been mentioned and my heart hurts. I'm only on page 23, but I'm actually quite surprised that this book has started out with Navani. I thought it would start out with Yazna, considering she was crowned queen in the last book. I feel like there is so much going on with the lore and like foreshadowing here, because Gavila has just had a meeting in Navani's office and there are a bunch of people in there that are not the ambassadors they say they are, and they also have spren in gemstones, but the spren are like void spren. They're not right, and Navani's questioning it, and Gavila says, I have a meeting shortly with Meridus and the others, and I know Meridus is Amaram, I think. Gavila and Amaram were conspiring, and we already know what Amaram is like as a human being. He's terrible. So Gavila was remembered as a great king, but we know he's not a great person, and he treats Navani like crap as well. So Dalinar and Navani are making a lot more sense now. Oh yes, go Navani. She said, besides, I don't care for Amaram. Yazna can do better. Navani is amazing. You realize that girl still loves you, Galabar. She's talking here about Yazna and how she respects him. They all do. Elokar, Dalinar, the boys, they worship you. Are you sure you want to reveal to them what you truly are? They are your legacy. Treat them with care. They will define how you are remembered. And they absolutely have defined how he's been remembered. Oh my goodness. I barely even noticed Navani in my reread of the first 3 books. I mean, obviously I noticed her, she's pretty great, but I didn't realize how awesome she was until reading this. Like, this woman is standing up to the king. She's so cool. Oh, Gavila is horrible. This explains Navani's choice because she loved Dalinar and Gavila, but the narration says she recoiled from him, pulling out of his grip and turning her head to the side. She closed her eyes and felt tears on her cheeks. It was more complicated than he implied, as she had loved both of them, and Dalinar's intensity had frightened her, so Gavila seemed the safer choice. Little did she know that Gavila sucks. Oh, Gavila just said, I have discovered the entrance to the realm of gods and legends, and once I join them, my kingdom will never end. I will never end. There's a lot of talking here about truth and lies. Navani is obviously furious at Gavila for the way he's just treated her, and she says, in her head, she says, no, don't let his lies become your truth. Fight it. So it'd be cool if she became a Radiant. I mean, having both her and Dalinar as Radiants, I don't know if that would be a bit much, but I really respect and love her character. A lot more than I had in the past, but she's never really been the focus of the book. So, ooh, it was such a cool choice to start Rhythm of War with her. I'm on page 36 now, and we're reading from Lirin's perspective, and he's saying that it's been a year since the Parshendi had awoken, and a year since the first ever storm. Oh my god, Kaladin has just been stabbed in the neck repeatedly. Oh, this is cool. I'm just reading the end of page 49, and Kaladin is talking about the Voidbringer, or the Fuse rather, that he's fighting in the air, in the fog, and saying that each of the Fuse, they apparently have abilities like the Radiants do, which makes them a little bit more hard to fight. So I anticipate they're gonna have a huge cataclysmic battle kind of sequence later in the book, which will be awesome. But Kaladin is saying that the one that he's fighting at the moment can teleport, and they have to go somewhere to replenish their void light and then come back. This is really cool. I bet they go to Shadesmar, because that's been taken over by Odium now, I think, because that's what they struggled to get through from the Oathgate in the last book. So I'm assuming that something's going on with Shadesmar and it's turning into Dark Shadesmar or something. I love that Syl is being advised by Adeline, because it says that she's changed the way she looks in terms of her dress, and I don't think I actually said this in the spoiler discussion video on the first 3 books when we were talking about Adeline, but I actually like the way that Kaladin and Adeline have been set up as close friends. I think they would actually make a better couple than Adeline and Shallan. I think Kaladin and Adeline have a lot more, I guess, compatibility, and they get on each other's nerves, but they also support each other. I just really like thinking about them as like a potential, but I don't think obviously it's gonna happen, because in the previous book Adeline and Shallan got married, and Bran doesn't usually break off a marriage unless one of them dies, like Gavila. So I don't think it's ever gonna happen, but I can still think about it in my heart because I love all these characters. Also, I don't think there's enough of a relationship between Shallan and Kaladin to actually form a romance. I think they'd be an awesome friendship. Same with Adeline and Shallan. I think it's way too early for them to be the way they are. I think they should either still be courting or just friends. So moving on, because I could get into a whole discussion about that on its own. Oh, this is nice. We're just hearing from Vale, and she was talking about Radiant and Shallan talking in their own head and saying that they feel a lot more balanced now, which is really nice. So hopefully we get less identity crisis and more character development in this book. Because while I liked Shallan's chapters, I didn't love the way that they just felt so internal. I prefer more action, and it seems like she's on an undercover mission as Vale, so I'm so intrigued. I didn't realize Shallan hadn't remembered everything about her past. She's talking about it on page 54, and she's having an internal dialogue with Vale, and Vale says it might be time, Vale whispered, to remember once and for all everything. No, it was not. But ... Shallan retreated immediately. No, we can't think of that. Take control. I thought she'd remembered and acknowledged that she killed her father. Like, I thought that was the thing that she hadn't remembered. But maybe there's a reason that only she can, I guess, make an impact on those creatures, like the one at the base of Urithru and the one that was in the city. Maybe there's a reason that she can impact them and no one else can, or maybe that's just a Lightweaver thing. I'm not sure. But I had a theory, as well as Dave, my partner, when we did that discussion video. One of our theories was the next big thing that is going to be in a Sanderson book, like the next level they need to reach, is to get the Radiant armor. And to say their next ideals, that would be what they need to do to get it. And it looks like this thing is holding Shallan back from reaching the next level. And so I think that will be the armor, potentially. Because in the last book, at the end, it mentioned that Yazna had geometric shapes kind of deflecting debris when she was in the battle, so she might be close to saying the next ideal and getting the armor. Like, that's what has been hinted so far. It'll be interesting to see if that's like the next level and who gets it first and why and how. I love how Syl is impersonating Kaladin. And I saw someone mention that Syl is like the therapist of Kaladin, which would actually give me a lot of relief when it comes to his character, because it looks like he's in his depression again and he goes kind of in and out of it, but I always worry about him. Navani designed like a floating skyship? A floating platform. Navani is honestly the coolest, and I didn't think that Kaladin's family had seen the last of this series, because they're just too interesting to not include. And I love that Liren is not supportive of Kaladin's fighting. Like he said, I trained you to be better than this. I trained you for something else, which is obviously healing. There is already so much character and so much world building and so many more new ideas presented, and it's only 60 pages in. So we are on day 2 of me reading Rhythm of War, and I'm now on page 70. And I just wanted to mention, because I didn't talk about it before, but it was really brief in the initial chapters introducing Kaladin again. And he said he was having a conversation with his mum and Syl, and he said something along the lines of dating this girl named Lynn, and then she broke up with him. And I don't want Kaladin to be in a relationship. Navani is just awesome. I think she's going to become a Radiant. She's also talked about Urithru and how in the past people were thriving there because there are fields and stuff, but she doesn't know how to grow anything. And I love how intelligent she is, but she's very humble and subtle about it. She kind of manipulates other people into doing things so that she doesn't get the attention for doing them. And I think that comes from her being with Gavila, so that he didn't pay all the attention to her for scholarly things that didn't associate with, I guess, her job of being a woman and being a wife to him. So there's definite trauma there. And she did mention with Dalinar, he's just decided in conversation with a general to go and rescue these Herdasian people, which would have been fine anyway, but he never checked with her first, and it's technically her ship. And she said that she knows Dalinar respects her, but sometimes he just steps up to the plate because he knows that he's the most capable to do certain things, and it still irks her. So there's definite ramifications of her being in a relationship with Gavila showing up now. And she's obviously being built up for a reason. So I'm assuming that she's going to become some sort of radiant or figure out the key to Erithru and the sibling, which is the spren that used to be tied to Erithru but is now apparently slumbering. And that is akin to a spren dying. So Kaladin is just like, at this point there was only a single honest spren he knew of who was willing but didn't have a bond. But that was a problem for another time. He can't just drop stuff into the narrative like that and then be like, later. Kaladin, this is important. Also, it made me really happy to see that all of the people who were in Bridge 4 have now bonded a spren and they're a Windrunner Knight now. My sad Bridge boys got radiant powers. Every time a character is mentioned that we already know from the previous books, I get like a shot of serotonin. I love seeing them all again. In Yazna's interviews with the two heralds who had lived thousands of years, it had come out that they too were amazed by this creation. As incredible as it seemed, modern Artifabrians had discovered things that even the herald hadn't known, meaning the airship. But now they've talked to the heralds. This time skip has seemed to include a bunch of stuff for the world building, and we're only just finding out about it. These two heralds were mentioned and then there was another one before. So it seems like they're getting their knowledge from somewhere now, which is nice. They're not like all on their own in terms of radiant powers. And now we see Rock. I'm so happy. I said in our spoiler video discussion that I really wanted Rock to be part of this story in terms of being a focus character, because he has so much personality and so much detail to him that I was just really interested in hearing from him. Initially because on the US cover there is Shallan and Adeline's on it and they're in Shadesmar. I thought Rock and Teft and a few bridgemen might go with them. So I was hoping to hear from him a little bit more, but so far that's not been the case. One of the things that I love in a fantasy book is a cult, which sounds weird, but it makes all of the extremists of their religion depose whatever the good is happening in the world at the time. So obviously Dalinar is good and that is what he's been doing. He's like the king, and the cult is run by Ilalai Sadeas, who is Sadeas' wife, and they're called the Sons of Honor, I think, and Amaram was helping them at the start. I think he wanted to bring back the Void Spren or something. Shallan is trying to get into this cult and she's disguising herself as somebody else. I'm sorry if you can hear the crows in the background, but they're just going mental. But Shallan is trying to get into the cult, and because she's disguised they don't realise it's Shallan. But they've let it slip that they've got somebody in Dalinar's inner circle, and that's what they're getting their information from, like an informant. And so Shallan is panicked and she's like trying to get closer to them and she's making up schematics and stuff. And I'm really liking Veil and Radiant in her own head as well, and how they're all working together to create illusions and to work through like a heist kind of situation. It's just so cool seeing the growth from what she used to be to now. I'm assuming it's not like all said and done, that there are still obviously going to be problems and stuff, but I like where she's at now. I really enjoy her chapters, especially because even though it's talking, it's like new situations and it's pushing stuff forward, whereas last time it was a lot of just thinking, which is cool, but it's not enough for me to be hooked. I am on page 86, but it's going back and forth between Shallan's perspective and Kaladin's, and Kaladin is fighting a bunch of the heavenly ones, which are like the fused in the air near the airship, and it's talking about him being sad and tired lately, which is, you know, the onset of his depression. I think this is like the beginning threads of Kaladin having a really down period, like a meltdown almost, and then on the back of that meltdown I'm expecting him to say the next ideal and get the armor. So it's planting the seeds early, and I just want Kaladin to be happy. I just want him to smile once in this book. I just want him to smile once. I also hope he doesn't get paired up with anybody romantically. I really hope that doesn't happen because I don't want him to be in a relationship. So those are my thoughts, and I'm only page 86. There's a lot to go. That battle in the sky seemed to last a while, and I think it was done intentionally to show the dynamic between the heavenly ones and their like code of honor, because Leshwi, who is one of the Heavenly Ones, was fighting Kaladin, and they only fight one-on-one, and Kaladin dropped his spear in like a surrender, and then Leshwi pointed hers down as if to say it was a draw and let Kaladin go to save people that the fused were attacking. So at some point I'm thinking that Venli is going to appear and be one of the Heavenly Ones / Radiant. I'm not sure. I think they're different, and I think Leshwi is going to potentially become an ally. Maybe. It would just be interesting considering that they seem to be on the side of the fused, but the fused are way more destructive and the Heavenly Ones have a lot more honor. I'm interested, and I like that Brandon has set this up to show that they have structure and that they're not bloodthirsty like the fused are. It seems to be like a different faction, really. I'm now 162 pages in and I've taken notes. First of all, just in general, I'm really happy to see the amount of Kaladin content we're getting in here, because that's what I felt was lacking in Oathbringer. It seems like this is going to be a Kaladin-centric book with him saying the fourth ideal and him struggling towards getting that. After his conversation with Dalinar, that's what my line of thinking is, and I loved how he had that conversation with Dalinar. Dalinar, he's like the mentor, the Light Eyes mentor to Kaladin, even though Kaladin thinks himself worthless and he thinks himself nothing. My heart hurts whenever I read about Kaladin. But what was the other things that I wanted to say? I have notes. Okay, so the first note was basically about Kaladin, but it was also that he met Moash, and Moash was encouraging Kaladin to step into the darkness. I hate Moash. I hate him so much. I think before I said that I kind of respected him because I could see how his character was developing. No, that was past Beck and she was wrong. I hate Moash. He was encouraging Kaladin to kill himself. I hate Moash. No, Moash can die in a fire. Although I don't think, I'm just rereading my notes, I don't think that Kaladin is going to kill Moash, because Moash seems to reflect that darkness that Kaladin sees in himself. And if Kaladin can kill Moash, that means he can kill the darkness in himself. And I don't think he's going to heal his brokenness because it's a part of him. He just needs to move emotionally past it. And I think that is what his emotional journey is going to be throughout this book. So that's my general prediction. Also, Navani was talking about Gavila, I think, thinking about him. I don't have the actual page number because I just wrote the note down, so I didn't have to stop and start all the time because my camera battery needed charging. But it seemed like Gavila wanted to be a ruler of all the worlds. And I don't know if that's a Cosmere thing or not, but it was just really cool to note that he was quite power hungry and not a good person. So I don't know why she perpetuated the fact that he was a respectable human being when he was actually trash. I also like Navani's scholarly pursuits, and I think she's on her way to becoming a new kind of Radiant that we haven't seen before. And that links into all of her wonderings about the way that Fabrials work. I think when she's closer to cracking some of these mysteries is when she'll start revealing understandings to herself, and that might be when she starts to show some radiant powers, because she can also see when Dalinar opens the perpendicularity and refreshes everybody's Stormlight. When he does that, she can hear like a tone and she can see things around him. So I'm assuming that she can see that for a particular reason. I'm assuming there's a link there somehow. And she also got that span read note from somebody saying that Honestbryn can't be trusted. And that links into when we were in Shadesmar in Oathbringer, when everyone was judging Syl, and like it was like a social rejection almost. So I don't know why Honestbryn is so different. There was a lot of lore about the world put in recently in a chapter I just read from Venli's perspective, and I was actually really looking forward to seeing her again. I wasn't that interested in her in the past, but when it's brought up her now, she can use the void light and she's a radiant. So she can use both powers, which is really cool. And she's wanting to not form a rebellion, but she's wanting to take back agency for her people and not have them taken over by the spren of odium, because it's like a slow warping of their mind and odium takes them over. So even though they think they have the choice and they've made that choice to become part of odium's battle and take that spren into them, it's actually taken over their mind instead. So the choice was meaningless. There wasn't really a choice there of agency whatsoever. So I like what Venli is fighting for, and she hasn't been found out yet. So she's wanting to go away from odium and from the Alethi side and go and form her own kind of government and coalition and settlement away from all of this. But she can't do that the same way that it happened last time, because last time it happened, the Parshendi escaped after the war was ended, and obviously this one is continuing on. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing set up here, but I think there's probably stuff that I've missed because they were talking a lot about world building and a lot about the singers in this chapter that I've just read on page 162. So I think because there's so much world building done in such a short time, I'm going to pick up a lot more in my reread because obviously I'm going to reread this. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm annoyed with Shallan because as much as she thinks that she is okay and her 3 personalities are balanced now in terms of her managing them. She mentioned someone called a formless or a forged, no, a formless. And that was like a new identity that's kind of brewing, and it's coming from her not telling Adeline things, like the fact that she's a member of the Ghost Bloods. So I wish she would just come forward and say it, but that links into her not telling him things about her past that her memory has clouded over from her not remembering and being able to acknowledge it. So I think both her and Kaladin are going to undergo some major character development in this one. Shallan is just having a conversation with Mraize, the head of the Ghost Bloods, and he said, trade to Rosha through Shadesmar has been historically difficult, so he wants to basically kick that off so he can control all commerce there. And he said, as there is only one stable access point, one controlled by the Horn-Eaters, who have been unpleasant to deal with. Yet Rosha has something that so many other peoples in the Cosmere want. Free, portable, easy to access power. He referenced the Horn-Eaters, he referenced the Oath Gates, and he referenced the Cosmere. Plus also a prediction that I made in our discussion video kind of came true because Rock just had a conversation with Kaladin about going back home and getting exacted under justice of the Horn-Eaters for using a weapon in battle because it's forbidden for them because of their social structure. So he's going off and he's got a honor guard yet to be appointed of Windrunners. So I kind of saw that part coming, but what if it is going to include Shallan like I thought and maybe Adeline's on a quest through Shadesmar to get there? Because like I said in my discussion video, Shallan has orange hair and she looks like a Horn-Eater, so she could blend in quite well, and Adeline wouldn't want her going alone. I think that would be a good excuse for Kaladin to go, but he also just refused to go with Rock because he didn't want to run away from his responsibilities. And also I love that Adeline is the one that recognised Kaladin's distress and that he couldn't be alone because of his mental health and how bad it was getting. So he's the one who went and, I mean, summoned by Syl obviously, but he's the one who went and pulled Kaladin out and plonked him in a bar and made sure that he was around people that cared about him. I love them. Kaladin also briefly mentioned the sword Maya that Adeline has, and Adeline was very adamant in not giving her up because he could maybe become a Radiant, but he doesn't want to give up the sword in order to reject a dead spren to find a live one. So I like that there's a variation of Knights Radiant with Venli. I like that there's a variation on the theme with Adeline and the dead spren, and I like that there is a variation on the Radiance with Renarin because he's bonded a void spren and doesn't have the same abilities as someone of his order. I love what is being set up here. I don't think it's all going to be explained in one book though, and I'm honestly really surprised that we've seen everybody except Yazna at this point. I thought this would be a Yazna-centric book and we'd see a flashback of her that was mentioned in Oathbringer. So far we haven't, but I mean obviously there is time to get into that. This is a really cool Cosmere book because it's bringing together a lot of world building. Mraize, the head of the Ghost Bloods, is talking to Shallan still, and we're on page 190. And they're talking about Gavilar's intention, which Yazna still couldn't really find out, so Mraize has all the power here in terms of knowledge, but he's saying his aspirations were not nearly so lowly as collecting all of the shard blades. He recruited others, promising them a return to the old glories and powers. Some, like Amaram, listened because of those promises, but for the same reason were as easily lured by the enemy. Others were manipulated through their religious ideals, but Gavila, what did he truly want? Immortality in part. He thought he could become like the heralds. In his quest he discovered a secret. He had void light before the Everstorm. He carried it from Braze, the place you call damnation. He was testing the movement of light between worlds, and one close to him might have answers. At any rate, we couldn't risk Eli or the Sons of Honor recovering those secrets. Somebody knows all of the secrets. It looks like Restares or Restares is perhaps the only living person who knew what Gavila was doing. There it is. Mraize says that he lives in Shadesmar, the fortress named Lasting Integrity, home and capital city of the Honor Spren in Shadesmar, which makes me wonder whether Kaladin might go with them because Honor Spren aren't appearing as fast to bond with Radiance as they would need them to. So maybe Kaladin goes in with them to find out why. I don't know. I just want my trio on a quest. Who really is Mraize? Honestly, he seems to know so much about the Cosmere in general. And after Shallan completes this mission, he's promising her answers about the world, Radiance, about other places, about her and her past. Who is this guy? Hello, it is the same day. I have just changed. We're now back in Venli's perspective, and something interesting has happened. There has been a character come back that is not one of the fused. It seems like they're higher up in rank, and her name is Raboniel, Lady of Wishes. And Raboniel is basically dispelling the notion that someone has reached the fourth ideal, because someone, oh god, what's his name? I'm not even doing well with names and I'm not listening to the audiobook. The Pursuer. He is a guy that Kaladin just killed and he's been reincarnated again. And this guy has a legacy, like a tradition, and that is to come back during the returns and continue to kill the people who killed him first. And this time the guy that killed him was Kaladin, but Li Shui has stepped up and said that she technically has claim on the next battle with Kaladin, so until she fights him again, he isn't fair game for the Pursuer to kill. So she's protecting Kaladin without realizing she's protecting Kaladin, and Venli is her voice, like her servant. I'm loving that Li Shui is having this alternative character development, but she's still very much set in the ways of the fused. She's still set in the beliefs of the fused, but she's willing to sidestep sometimes. And that is evident, obviously, when she is protecting Kaladin. I don't know how long it's going to last, but the thing that I actually turned the camera on for, we're on page 203, and Raboniel, this crazy chick from hell, she said, "It is obvious that the humans have been allowed too much time to grow. They run rampant across Roshar. They have steel weapons and advanced military tactics. They outstrip our own knowledge in areas." She continues to go on and say, "The one thing they do not yet have is mastery over their powers. There are very few among them of the fourth ideal, perhaps only one individual, and they do not have access to the tower now that the sibling is dead." Within that like flippant paragraph of conversation, it is stuffed full of world building. The sibling is the spren at the bottom of the tower that Navani was trying to investigate. The person that has the fourth ideal, I don't know if that's Dalinar, because he can reach into the perpendicularity, and he couldn't do that in the past. I don't know if Dalinar has reached the fourth ideal yet, or if Yazna has and she just hasn't told anybody, because my assumption is that the fourth ideal comes with armor, like the visions that Dalinar had in Oathbringer, where he was back in the battles during the Herald's Return and the Desolations, and he saw the Knights Radiant all have armor that they could summon on and off the way that they could summon their Shardblade without having to wait the 10 heartbeats. Raboniel is still talking, and she's talking to the 9, and she's talking to them as like a panel, and she's saying, "You have nearly perfected the suppression fabrials, which was just used on Kaladin, and he burst forth and killed everybody anyway because he's a boss." And then she's like, "Do not forget, it is technology I discovered from the tower itself thousands of years ago. I have a plan to use it in a more dramatic way. As the sibling is essentially a Deadeye, I should be able to turn the power's defenses against its owners." What's interesting here is that Adeline's has already started to prove that you can bring a Deadeye back to life, because that's what he's doing with his Shardblade. So is that what Navani is going to do with the sibling, that spren under the tower? That's my theory. Kaladin is just coming to Swordmaster Zahel? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but if you haven't read Warbreaker by this point, maybe skip this section. I'll put the Warbreaker cover on the screen, so when it's gone I will have stopped talking about this thing. Okay, it's Cosmere stuff, so I've just read the line with Zahil when Kaladin has said, "But you wouldn't give up the sword," meaning Zahil has joined the Ardents and technically given up fighting, but Brandon's included the sword specifically as a double meaning, but Kaladin, the character, doesn't know. We as the reader do. And Zahil replies, "Oh, I gave it up. I let it go. Best mistake I ever made." Which is him referring to letting go of Nightblood. Best mistake I ever made. Why? And also, we haven't heard from Seth at all yet. And we know he has Nightblood based on the events of, you know, the pinnacle of Oathbringer. Kaladin is having like a battle montage character growth moment with Zahil, because he's like, "Land a hit on me and you can join the Ardents." And then he throws a sheet in Kaladin's face and disappears into all of the rest of the billowing laundry, and Kaladin is finding him and like pursuing. I was hoping for more of him in this, and I have just been fed with more of him. Oh my gosh, I only just turned the camera off, but I'm turning it back on because we're now on 2:19 and Kaladin and Zahel are having their like spar, I guess. Zahel is using cloth and fighting Kaladin's sword off with it, but he said Zahel strode calmly to the side, whipping his scarf with a solid crack, then spinning it around like a mace. Kaladin didn't see any stormlight coming off the Ardent. And he had no reason to believe the man could surge bind, but the way the cloth had gripped Kaladin's arm had been uncanny. Is this where the magic systems converge? Because I remember in Warbreaker, Vasha being able to use the colours in the world as like breath to control objects. Is that what he's doing here? Is that why he always wears bright colours? Because Kaladin has seen him wearing bright kind of mismatched colours. Does he do that so he's armed all the time? Armed but without seeming like it? Because Kaladin just thinks he is eccentric. But we know that he's from Warbreaker. Ah, cool! Kaladin's like, I think I've seen this style before. You fight like Azure does. She fights like me, boy. She's hunting for you, I think. So Adeline has said, the fool woman will have to get through cultivation's perpendicularity first, so I wouldn't hold my breaths waiting for her to arrive. He said breaths! He said breaths! This is so cool. There is so much Warbreaker stuff in here. Kaladin is having this soul-searching moment and he's like, do you believe, Kaladin asked as he advanced, in God or the Almighty or whatever? I don't have to believe, the voice drifted back. I know gods exist. I simply hate them. This is going back to the Pantheon where the Warbreaker events occurred. Yes! Confirmation that Zahel is using the breath magic from Warbreaker, because he said, the narrator says, he tossed his scarf at Kaladin's feet, though it must have been a different scarf, for the one he'd started with had been bright red and this one was dull grey. Kaladin's like, I don't know what any of that meant, but thanks for replying. Wit never gives me answers, at least not straight ones. And Zahel's straight up like, that's because Wit's an asshole. This is so cool. Zahel is talking about types of investment when it comes to magic systems and souls, and he's saying that Syl is a type 1, like cut off a section of divinity and it will eventually become alive on its own, and Zahel is calling himself a type 2 invested because apparently he has died and his soul left an imprint and that power has been brought back to life, which is really interesting because that makes me wonder what the Deadeye are technically ranked, because they were a Spren like the type 1 but they're not anymore, so are they type 2, which means that they can be resurrected. Kaladin's trying to figure out how to kill the fused, like for good, and permanently cutting them off from their power source is a way, rather than just trapping them and starving them to death, because they've survived thousands of years, so that's probably not going to happen. But cutting them off from their power source to odium would be a successful thing, or to kill them by disrupting their souls and unraveling them completely. And Zahel is like, you can't just rip them apart, you need a weapon so strong it unravels the soul. I know through sorry experience those kinds of weapons are very dangerous to make and never seem to work right. I think he's referring to Nightblood there. And Kaladin has just said that he wants to do essentially the same thing as Venli, but without realizing he's echoing it. He said, there's another way, Kaladin said. We could convince the fused to stop fighting. Instead of killing them, we could find a way to live with them. Zahel has said, grand ideals, optimism. Yeah, you'd make a terrible swordmaster. Be wary of those fused, kid. The longer one of us exists, the more like a Spren we become. Consumed by a singular purpose, our minds bound and chained by our intent. We're Spren masquerading as men. That's why she takes our memories. She knows we aren't the actual people who died, but something else given a corpse to inhabit. She? Kaladin asked. Zahel didn't respond. Who dis? Let's hope I can get this update in before my camera fills up. So, I am 297 pages through. We're being fed so much world building in this book because the Unmade, we got a perspective from her and her name is Sja Anat. But in hearing from her perspective, she has also confirmed that the Thrill is actually another Unmade, which is awesome. And her cousin is actually the sibling who is sleeping or not active, but in the tower, and she wants to reconnect with the sibling. Also, Wit, I'm confused because he's not really doing anything. He's just kind of shown up to be in collusion with Yazna, and Navani observes that they might be together now, which, considering how old Wit is, because he's Hoyt, considering how old he is, I'm like, buddy. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about Navani. Navani keeps deflecting her genius, which I'm like, girl, you're You are super clever. But she keeps deflecting it whenever somebody gives her praise on it, and I think that's just her learned response from being in a relationship with Gavila that was quite an abusive one. So I think that's where her brokenness comes from, and it really feeds further into my theory of her becoming a kind of scholarly radiant, because if she does, that will be like the good light radiant mirror image to Rabbanil, I think, who was part of the fused. But Navani is very much the opposite, and she likes to see things grow and flourish in a positive way. So it would be cool to see those as opposing forces, like we're seeing Kaladin and Moash as opposing forces. I did want to mention though that Brandon seems to be combining a lot of world building in this book in particular. It's like he's set up all the characters that he needs to, and he's still introducing new ones and stuff obviously, but he's also introducing a lot more lore, especially with Warbreaker. Like I said earlier, he's shown a different magic system already coexisting in this world. He's shown Mraize as knowing a lot. The Cosmere has actually been mentioned in text quite a few times as well, and I'm assuming because they're talking in here about metal a lot, does that mean that the Mistborn magic system is going to show up eventually? That would be sick. I also want to know more about Adeline, because he got really excited when they got talked about going back to Shadesmar again, and I think it's because he wants to see Maya as an actual like spren he can interact with that's human sized. I keep going, I'm not gonna update, and then here I am updating. It's just because this book is too good, not gonna lie. So I'm now in Shadesmar, they're in Shadesmar, and Adeline, he's just precious. He's precious. I loved how he went to visit Kaladin before he left. I love how he encouraged Kaladin. I love their friendship. Now they're in Shadesmar. Kaladin isn't, he's been left behind because he chose not to go. But I love that Shallan has just checked her trunk and checked the box that Mraize gave her so that she could, I don't know, report back to him. And she was like, the spy has been in my stuff and has moved this device that no one else knows about. I'm betting money that Vale is the spy. And the way that Vale overtook her when they were in training and she made a decision on behalf of Shallan and Radiant, Vale is one who is like, I'm gonna take control, and Shallan felt trapped by her when she did that. So there's definitely not a balance happening at the moment. Something has got to shift. Something has got to be acknowledged. And I'm pretty sure that Vale is the one who is the spy. Vale is the one who likes to do the spy stuff. Vale is the one who is keen to work with the Ghost Bloods. It kind of just adds up. And the fact that she's done it and then made Shallan not remember, I don't think it's anybody else that is on the team that is the spy. I think it's Shallan. I'm probably going to look really dumb if my prediction is wrong, but I don't care. At the moment, it seems like it's Shallan because it's setting up in the narrative to make us expect that it's somebody else. But I think the smart choice would actually be to say Shallan, because she's keeping this whole working with the Ghost Bloods thing a huge secret. She's acting like an informant for information, but really she is genuinely working with Mraize. Like, she's working for the Ghost Bloods and she's just lying to herself about doing it. So kind of fits with her order, to be honest, the order of the cryptics. I wanted to talk about Adeline because before he left for Shadesmar on that quest, he talked to Dalinar, and the way that he spoke to Dalinar, he had this internal anger and internal monologue about that can't be forgiven when it came to Dalinar murdering his wife in the past. Obviously, we know he didn't do it on purpose, and he was under the thrill, which is like the influence of the Unmade at the time. Hello, it is day 3 of reading Rhythm of War. Yes, also I have braces now, I got them on yesterday. This update is going to be really quick, and I'm going to talk about Syl, and I'm going to talk about Yazna, and briefly Kaladin as well, because it's not a secret that I love Kaladin. I love the conversation that Syl had in here. While Kaladin was asleep, she went off and explored and then had a conversation with Dalinar, and she really wants to understand Kaladin more and understand his depression, and that I think is going to tie really neatly into the theme of him getting the 4th ideal. Also, it was confirmed basically that Yazna has the 4th ideal, like she's achieved that point because she can do things with Stormlight in a more advanced way Kaladin has observed than the others can. We're basically all assuming now that she knows the 4th ideal, so I think some of the others like Kaladin and Shallan are going to follow after her pretty soon. Maybe Dalinar as well, but we haven't had emotional development of him. I'm hoping that Syl trying to understand more of Kaladin and his depression, I think the understanding has to come from the Spren of the emotional side and also from the Radiant themselves in an emotional growth. So I think when that understanding aligns, that's when they can get to the 4th ideal. And I also think that's going to happen with Patton and with Shallan, because obviously Shallan is keeping stuff from Patton. So I'm assuming that Formless here is going to be a bigger aspect of Shallan's personality, because Vale seems to be stepping back and letting Shallan take precedence over their personalities, and I think eventually Vale is either going to get absorbed by Formless, or Shallan is going to take on Vale's personalities as like becoming the next level of herself, basically. I'm not sure how to say that, but that is my theory. I don't think Vale contacted the Ghost Bloods. I think Formless did, because it's been set up that the spy has been identified, and I don't think it's the spy that we think it is. I think it's just Shallan in her own head bringing up convenient excuses. I also wanted to talk briefly about Yazna and Kaladin. In going to this mental health place, Kaladin was aware of Yazna being involved in soul casting a lot of the rarer medicines, and it just shows a depth to Yazna that I didn't realize she had. It gives you a sense that she's more emotional and more empathetic than we thought she was, or at least that I thought she was, because I see her as like ruthless, and I think she can be, but I think she also has a softness to her as well, which was really cool to see. I'm now on page 458, but my camera got cut off last update, so I wanted to mention what I was talking about then, and that was Adeline, and Adeline has just had an awesome battle sequence to save Notum, who is the honor spren that was captain of the ship last time they were in Shadesmar. So he's just gone back and saved Notum from these humans who are brutalizing him and wanting to make him into a Deadeye. But before we even went into Shadesmar, there was a conversation between Adeline and Dalinar, and Adeline now has the, I guess, the brokenness that you would start to associate with a Radiant, because he has an anger for Dalinar, and he also doesn't feel adequate doing anything because he's been raised as the perfect son, and if he's the perfect son he can't achieve anything, so he feels cut off before he can even do anything. And I think this is the beginning of Adeline's Radiant journey, because when he was fighting he was saying stuff in line with a soldier's perspective, but I think those were his versions of ideals, and I think Maya coming to help him means that she's starting to be resurrected. So I think Adeline is going to prove that you can resurrect a dead spren, and I think that is going to feed into Navani's assumptions about how to resurrect the sibling. I think it's all connected, and I love it. I love how we're seeing more of Adeline in this book, because that's what I wanted more of, because I love Adeline and I love seeing a depth to him, whereas before he was just a side character, and while we got to see him we didn't get to see his emotional depth. This book is very much emotional depth and world building. Kaladin has just been summoned to help the sibling. I'm really hoping that Lei Shui is there, because like I predicted, she was kind of an ally in the fact that she saved Kaladin's family as a favour to Venli, but still, she saved them. So, I see you, Lei Shui. There's also the mention of the Rhythm of War, the text within the book, which is what Brandon's done with each of his books so far. But the way that this is structured, I mean, I know the references in the previous books, but this one it seems to be like almost a conversation or a report, and each time the symbols change, but I've noticed they're recurring. So is this Cosmere stuff as well? Because the way that it's structured here, I can just show you, I've got the book. The way that it's structured, it's like the Mistborn symbol. God, Kaladin is so smart at fighting, and I love how Syl helped him as well. Also, she can change colours now, and someone earlier said, I think it was the sibling. The sibling said to Navani that colour has meaning for Spren, so I don't know if that means that she's growing as well. It probably does. Hi, I think this is day 5 of me dedicating time to reading and vlogging this, but I stopped reading at 761 pages because the line that Wit said blew my mind. He's talking to Yazna here, which is nice, because at the beginning I thought there wasn't much Wit and Yazna, but it seems to be building into the world building with their conversations. And so Wit has said the Ghost Bloods are not a Rosharian organisation, and I don't think you appreciate the danger they present. Which is confirmed that Mraize is basically from the Cosmere, like from a different planet. And also something really cool that I didn't mention before, I love the lift, because we thought she'd been using Stormlight this whole time. Turns out she hasn't been. She's been using light, which is a different form of energy. It makes sense, I think. Navani said there are 3 types of light for the 3 types of divinities. So there's void light for odium, there is stormlight for the Stormfather or for honor, and then there is light for cultivation, which is super cool. And lift is for cultivation because that's what her spren is linked to. So I love it. I am now in part 4 of this book, which is on page 858, and we're finally back with Adeline. It seems like he made this grandstand, had a cool battle in Shadesmar, and then Brandon was like, okay later. So finally we're hearing more from him. I like how Venli and Li Shui are kind of aligning themselves with Kaladin and Kaladin's side in the Radiance. Also, I like seeing R'lain a lot more. I can't say his name out loud. I can say it just fine in my head. I like hearing more from him. I think he's incredible, but I don't think he's gonna bond the sibling like Navani was expecting. I think we're nearing the beginning of like the Sanderlanche of the end of the book, so I just hope none of my favourites end up dying. Brandon just used the title Rhythm of War in the actual book, and it was when Rabbanil and Navani were testing their theories with light and how to combine them, and Navani listened to the rhythm of Roshar and helped combine it into the gemstone, so it was Void Light and Stormlight, which it's so much world building and lore and detail, and it's like logic applied to Brandon's magic system, which is actually mind-blowing. It's just incredible. But also, I want more action. I think it's building up to that point. Also, we keep going back to like 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago, to when Venli and Ashonai are kids and they're just discovering the new rhythms and stuff. And while that is really cool, I know that Ashonai is dead, so I'm not as interested in the backstory. But some parts have been really interesting in regards to world building, but every time one of those chapters comes up, I'm like, I'm not quite as interested as I would be with a main character. But I'm interested in Venli in present time, just not so much in the past. I think I've just read one of my favourite quotes in this book so far, and it's on page 972, and it's when Notum says, "Honor is not dead so long as he lives in the hearts of men." I knew the Veil was going to throw in the towel. I'm on page 1015 and Vale and Shallan are still in Shadesmar. It's the last day of Adeline's trial, and Shallan is on her way to kill Kelek, the honest friend, the herald. And Vale is like, "You can," Vale whispered. "I've protected you all these years, but it's time for me to leave. It's time for me to be done." Shallan thankfully has now merged with Vale and has decided not to kill the herald, but now that Spren that talked against Adeline in the trial has appeared, and they've decided to put the herald away because he might be having another bout of weakness. Rigged! There seems like a parallel in the way that the mental health patients in Erithru were sequestered away from everybody, and it seems to be mirrored in Shadesmar with how all of the Deadeye Spren are kind of kept away from everybody. They're like seen to and taken care of, but they're not really given any humanity. And the way that Adolin has had his relationship with Maya, he's been interacting with her and treating her with respect and engaging with her, and that has started to bring her back. So I'm assuming that that is the key to bringing back the Deadeye, or it's part of it at least. Maya's voice grew louder, gasping breaths punctuated by ragged howls, and in that moment Adolin felt her pain somehow, a deep agony and anger. I love Adolin. I love Maya. Ugh. All of that build up in Shadesmar was so worth it. Oh my god. And it's refuted a truth that we thought about the world, which is like peak Sanderson. Blended and Spren describes it when she's having a conversation afterwards with Adolin, and she said, "I do not know if making new radiance is a good idea, but I must admit your ancestors were not traitors. Something did frighten them enormously to cause humans and Spren to destroy their bonds." So it wasn't humans deciding, it was humans and Spren deciding together, but the Spren not realizing that they might die. And now Maya has confirmed that it was her sacrifice, or her and the other Spren. The rest of the quote is, "And if the Spren did not know they would die, then pieces of this puzzle are still missing. The questions are more complicated and more dangerous than we ever knew." I hope this is Cosmere stuff and that is the reason. Or Odium something, because Odium is a shard, so he's like a god, but he's just a vessel, I think. There is so much about this world building that is really new to me, and pieces are starting to click together. This world building is awesome, but I feel like I'm missing so much, but it might just be because Brandon's showing us like the iceberg, so he's giving us the top, but there's all the stuff underneath that I don't know. Navani is so bloody cool. She's like, she played the plates she'd created, indulging in their resonant tones. She put void-light spears into her arm sheath and listened until she could hum that tone. She was delighted when, after hours of concerted practice, she could draw void-light out with a touch, like the fused could do. Humans could sing the correct tones. Humans could hear the music of Rosha. Her ancestors might have been aliens to this world, but she was its child. Early on, I got it right when I was talking about her and Rabinil being kind of like balanced opposites almost, because Rabinil comes from like the darker side, but also as a scholar, and Navani comes from the light side with a scholarly mindset. So it's cool to see them balance each other in opposing forces. And now I thought this was all build up for Navani to become a Radiant, and she still might, but I like that she's started to weave her own understanding through the understanding of the fused. I think this is just very subtle storytelling and it's worked really, really well. This is it, part 5, the beginning of the end. Bum ba! I think Brandon's written Yazna as Ace, which is actually pretty cool, but I wish it was used on the page. Like, he's used so many other ways of describing character on page, but he just, something about the way that Brandon writes relationships and writes romance or non-romance in this sense, something is amiss, and I find that is my key frustration. Because Adeline and Shallan said that they loved each other before, but I was like, why? Because I haven't seen that developed. I've seen a connection, for sure, but I haven't seen that emotionally developed. Adeline seems invested and all in. Shallan, not so much. So I can see it from Adeline's perspective, but not so much Shallan's. Anyway, Yazna was like, she could provide the intimacy Wit desired, though she knew he found her lack of excitement on that axis odd, perhaps unsatisfying. That was not a new experience for her. She'd always found it curious how others put their physical urges ahead of the more powerful emotions of bonding, relating, and engaging. So it just sounds like sex isn't something that she's interested in, even though she does it anyway. Wit and Yazna are having a conversation here, and Wit is like, I promise, but look, Yazna, Ray's odium is someone we can defeat. So when Shallan went into Shadesmar under the task of the Ghostbloods to find Rays, no, yes? Is this the same person? So Shallan was after odium this entire time for the Ghostbloods? Is that who they wanted to make a pact with? I think I'm just talking myself in circles and I'm confused. I love how Dalinar also now has faith in Kaladin. He's like, common sense dictated that one man was nothing against an army of fused. Yet Dalinar wondered, once in the war camps he'd argued with Kaladin's soldiers who had set up a vigil for the young Windrunner, then presumed dead. Dalinar had been proven wrong that time. Now he found himself possessing some of the same faith as those soldiers. Bridge 4 prevails! Teft. He's thinking about Kaladin and he's like, you did good with that one, Teft, he thought, giving himself permission to feel a little pride. You ruined your own life for something fierce, but you did good with that one. Sanderson is delivering on all the action and Kaladin got an awesome speech. Your life isn't the blood in your veins, but the legend you live. Each death kills that legend a little more. Each time I defeat you, it will rip you apart until you're no longer known as the pursuer. You'll be known as the defeated, the creature who, no matter how hard he tries, can't ever beat me. I hope Teft doesn't die. The way that his story arc has been and the way he showed pride for Kaladin, it's leading that way and I'm going to be very upset. Teft. Oh, I thought Alokar's death hurt, but that one... Brandon keeps mimicking thematic beats that have happened in the previous books, but in new and different ways with different contexts. Kaladin just scrambled to the edge of the tower and looked down. Suddenly he knew why he'd come this high. He knew where he was going. He'd stood on this ledge before, long ago in the rain. This time he jumped, but he's following his father to save him. So even though the situation is the same, I'm assuming that his reasoning is different, and Syl has just said that she's forgotten the words. So did he go to Odium or not? Kaladin always makes me cry. Fourth ideal. Nailed it. Venli has just shown her radiant power to Leishui and said that there are maybe other Spren who would try again with the singers, and Leishui's like, my soul is too long owned by someone else for that. Which is just kind of tragic. I knew it. I knew she'd bond the sibling. Navani the sibling said, I accept your words. And so with it comes my favourite line probably so far, which is Navani talking to Moash, journey before destination, you bastard. Kaladin just saved Liren and they had a father-son chat. I love how we're back with Dalinar and he's like, whatever was happening at Erythru, Kaladin would face it standing up straight. God beyond blessed be enough, and that the Windrunner could reach Navani. For now, Dalinar had to focus on his current task. Mate, Navani's got all this handled on her own. Like, she don't need Kaladin. Although, you know, he'd help, I imagine. Dalinar is just confronting the guy that is the Herald, the guy who had or created the Oath Pact initially. His name is Ishar, I think. And Ishar was like, I am that man no longer. I am Herald of Heralds, sole bearer of the Oath Pact. I am more than I once was, and I will become yet more. I will absorb your power, Odium, and become a god among gods, Adonalsium reborn. Is that... I know Rosharan is Roshar, like that's their universe. Is Adonalsium Mistborn? I need to look up my Brandon Sanderson lore, because again, I feel like I'm missing something. What? So Dalinar made the deal and then Tarvanian's like, lol, I'm a god now. His soul vibrated. Take me, the power played, speaking not in words but in emotion. You are perfect, I am yours. Tarvanian hesitated briefly, then thrust his hands into the well of power and ascended to godhood, becoming Odium. What? There has been foreshadowing for the whole book about Nightblood. And now Taravangian had drawn Nightblood and stabbed Odium with it. Seth didn't realise the spiritual transfer, he just thinks he killed Taravangian, but he actually killed Rhays, who was Odium. And now Taravangian's like, he could see so far, see so much, he needed to think, to burn, no, to plot, to... Tarvanian was startled as he became aware of something else, a growing power nearby, visible only to one such as him, a godly power, infinite and verdant. He was not alone. Does that mean that Nightblood was something else? It makes sense with all the characters and how they wanted to bind him, but they couldn't stop his power. This is terrifying. Taravangian was going to save them all. It also presents an interesting viewpoint that not all people start evil. It's just their choices that make them that way, because after a choice, some people will end up in the good and some will end up in the bad. And Taravangian is willing to sacrifice a ton of people to save the few. Shallan just wrapped up her conversation with Mraize as the Ghost Bloods and she's finally picked a side. Radiant is still present, but Vale is gone. Like I predicted, she's been absorbed. Basically, the Ghost Bloods are now the enemy, but Adeline's like, whoever they are, we can handle them. And it continued on to say Shallan reached forward and flipped to the next page in her notebook where she'd done a drawing using Kelleck's descriptions. He's the herald that they've come across. It showed a pattern of stars in the sky and listed the many worlds among them. Shallan had kept her head down too long. It was time to soar. Does this mean more Cosmia? There is no way that this is going to end in the 10 days it takes for Dalinar to be the champion in this fight with Odium. Like surely not. That's the next book, I imagine. Did Odium just destroy Wit's memory? Is Wit stuck in Groundhog Day? That's the end. I've finished it and I just want to turn it back around and start it all over again. As far as my predictions go, I think I got a lot of stuff like thematically on the ball, like Rabanil and Navani bonding the sibling, but she wasn't a deadeye, she was just slumbering. But then Adeline brought back Maya kind of, and Shallan consumed Vale, but she also didn't reach her fourth ideal, and I kind of expected her to, but I guess it didn't really work with both her and Kaladin doing it in the same book. I am so intrigued, and I feel like there's so much I missed in terms of world building, but I love how pieces of Warbreaker are starting to appear in here. Obviously, I gave this 5 stars. Let me know what you thought down below. Let me know what your favorite moment was, because so many were my favorites in this book. There were so many character moments. I cried so much at the end of this book. It was amazing. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'll chat to you down in the comments and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.